Morning, everyone. Glad to have you here with us today. My name is Mike Mellion. I'm the president of the Private Motor Truck Council of Canada. Just to go over a few ground rules before we get started. As you likely just heard, we are recording today's presentation. So at the conclusion, sometime later today or tomorrow, everyone that is registered will receive a copy to the recording of this presentation, and you will also receive a PDF of Andrew's presentation, which we'll get to here in a few minutes. Just for meeting setup, the ability for you to unmute yourselves and turn your cameras on has been disabled. That way it's not distracting to others while the presentation's going on, and we can focus on Andrew and what he's talking about. You do have the ability to chat. So any questions that you have, we'll ask you to put in the chat function, and we will reserve 10 minutes at the end of today's presentation. So at 11:50 a.m. Eastern time, we'll answer any questions that are in the chat feature. Feel free to put them in the chat feature whenever a question pops to your mind, and rest assured we will address them at the end of the presentation. And if there's too many questions for us to address, they will be provided to Andrew and your contact info, and they can be addressed afterwards if need be. Just before we get into the presentation, I also want to go over a few things. Today's presentation is sponsored by the PMTC's Young Leaders Group. If you're interested in being part of our Young Leaders Group, it's for professionals under 40 years of age. I encourage you to go to our website or reach out to our office. You can join our Young Leaders Group for $125 a person per year, and it allows you to network with individuals maybe in your own age bracket. We also have a program that we run every year called the Driven to Lead program. It's an annual skills development program. It's hosted by our Young Leaders Group, but it's actually available for anybody. So you don't have to be 40 or under to attend this group. It's valuable to a person of any age. It's leadership development training, and it's provided by the Dale Carnegie Group. They did our Driven to Lead program last year, and the reviews were excellent. So we've contracted them again to do it this year. It's open to professionals of all ages and stages in their career. It's a great toolkit for current managers to add to their portfolio. It can also help develop emerging managers. It's being held September 11th, 18th, and 25th at Dale Carnegie's facility in Mississauga. 11th has to be in person. 18th and 25th virtual is an option. In person would be highly suggested, but in virtual is an option for those 2 days. Content that it contains is information on leadership, organizational results, planning, employee coaching and appraisals, recognizing human potential, delegating, which I think a lot of us can, I can speak for myself anyway. Delegation can sometimes be an issue that we all struggle with. How to handle mistakes, communicate the leading effective meetings, commit to continuous improvement, and celebrating success. It's 6 highly interactive sessions, so there's 2 sessions per day. Said it is interactive. Feedback from this year's, the ones that completed it last year was excellent. There's the location of the event. Included in your fee is a participant manual, a breakthrough plan, pocket reference booklet, how to win friends, how to stop worrying and start living, and a leader-to-leader journal. Pricing. So our pricing for this is very competitive. Thanks to 3 sponsors, KRTS, 10 Street, and Transrep, we can actually offer this to you for less than you would pay if you went to Dale Carnegie on your own. It's $1,999 if you're a PMTC member, $2,349 if you're not. And that also includes a free registration to our 2025 conference because all Driven to Lead graduates are recognized on stage at our conference. So that's a $590 value based on 2024 pricing. So really you're getting this program for roughly $1,300. So it's a relatively inexpensive course and great value. Membership pricing is available to all member companies. So you as an individual don't have to be a member, just your company has to be a member, and then you will receive individual pricing. You're going to get a copy of this, so you'll have information on how to register. If you have issues registering as a member, even though you know your company is, just reach out to Annette at the office. A maximum of 25 people. And if you register by June 20th of this year, we will enter you in an early bird draw to win a 2-night hotel stay at our 2024 conference hotel. So you're going to get free registration to our conference included in the cost, and a chance to win your hotel stay covered as well. Any more information you need on it this will be sent out in the email as well. So with that, I'm going to introduce you to Andrew here. Andrew, while I'm doing your introduction, I'm going to stop the screen share and you can pull yours up. But we're going to get what you were here for today. So with us today, we have Andrew Holmes. Andrew's role as a senior of cardiopulmonary and sleep services at Queensway Carleton Hospital in Ottawa. Andrew led the team responsible for the operations of a full-service community hospital in his 15 years of experience routinely performing diagnostic sleep services. Andrew is a sleep educator and has presented many talks on sleep hygiene, fatigue impairment, sleep and the aging process, and best sleep practices. He is a sleep consultant to the Ottawa Senators Hockey Organization. In addition, he has been featured on CBC's The National and routinely appears as a sleep subject matter expert on numerous news and media networks. And as a diehard Toronto Maple Leafs fan who watched them sleep through most of last night's game, maybe you could reach out to them and see if we could wake them up or get them some sleep so they're ready to go. But anyway, Andrew, I'll pass it over to you. Sit back and enjoy the show with everybody else.
Thank you. Thanks for the intro. I think maybe I should take the fact that I work with the Ottawa Senators out of the bio now. It's not really the most, the point that I want to highlight the most out of all of my accomplishments, but it is a fun one. So yeah, thanks for taking the time to join today. My name is Andrew Holmes, as Mike Milana just introduced. I've been in the sleep game now for about 20 years. I'm the age of 46. I've got 2 boys that are teenagers, and I'm dealing with that on a daily basis. And I got into sleep about when I was 25, 26, and it's kind of a strange one to kind of fall into. And a lot of people think, like, how is this guy going to talk about sleep for the next 45 minutes? There's actually over 100 different types of sleep disorders, and I know a little bit about all of them and a lot about most of them. So throughout the course of the presentation, as Mike said, if you want to throw some questions up in the chat, we'll probably keep them until the end. And I'm going to kind of walk you through what we call like an A to Z science of sleep presentation. We're going to touch on a variety of different things: the physiological process, talk about some sleep apnea and some other sleep disorders, best sleep practices. And yeah, at the end, we'll have an open discussion, and I encourage you to, ask. There's no silly questions, of course, and you can reach out to me directly as well. Sometimes people would like to ask something personal. So again, you can reach out to Mike, or I'm sure he'll circulate the PDF slides, but all my contact info will be in there as well. If you have a personal question that you want to ask, you can email me directly, and I'd be happy to answer that specific question to you. I'm here as a sleep consultant. And as Mike said, I started off my career at the Queensway Carleton Hospital working in a sleep lab, working straight overnights for 10 years, doing diagnostic and therapeutic studies. And then I led the team at the Queensway Carleton Hospital, where I was running the sleep lab. And sleep efficiency was born about 2015, 2016. And we're now currently seeing thousands of patients on an annual basis. We have probably about 100 to 200 family doctors that refer to us. And I'll talk about what our kind of services are from a home sleep testing perspective towards the end of the slide presentation. So prior to early 2000s, we only really thought that sleep was this thing that happened when we went to bed at night, and wasn't not a lot of study was done on what the actual process was, what was happening when we were sleeping at night. We slept because it had to be done. It's an involuntary process. It was only in the late 60s, 1960s, where they first started to realize that there was a lot more going on when we were sleeping than what was once thought. The early 2000s and I guess the late 1990s, more and more research started to come out. The birth of sleep labs started to kind of go across the globe, because in the late 50s, early 60s, they ran their first few sleep tests. But they were actually just looking at what they call EEG, which is electroencephalogram. And they were looking at different brain activity that was happening throughout wakefulness, but then also looking to see what happened when we went to sleep at night. And they actually discovered that there's a lot more going on than what was once thought. It used to be thought as just this dormant period. We didn't really know why it had to happen. We had to shut down for 6, 7, 8 hours, sometimes more, sometimes less. We woke up feeling good and rinse, repeat the whole thing over and over again. Fast forward to today, there's extensive research. It's $1 billion industry. There are sleep apps on your phone now. There's on your watches. You're getting all this different data that some of the accessories that you're using on your phones and your apps. The technology isn't quite there yet, but it's definitely improving, and it shines a spotlight on my career. So I definitely have to support it. Sleep is definitely one of those biological necessities that supports our physical, mental, and emotional health. It can impact a variety of different systems, and without quality sleep, you can be really putting yourself at risk for a variety of different health complications. As I mentioned at the beginning, it was the late 50s, early 60s where we went into these EEG tests, and they started looking at the brain activity, and they realized that there was a massive shift that started to occur in the electrical activity that was actually happening when we slept at night. These later became to be known as what they call sleep cycles. So when everybody goes to sleep at night, they pass through sleep cycles, which are 90 minutes in duration. And we pass from the latest stages of sleep to the deepest stages of sleep, and we close out with a REM period. So if we go to bed, for 6, 7, 8 hours, we have, likely 4, 5, or 6 REM or sleep cycles of 90 minutes in duration that kind of rinse and repeat again. And each one of those stages, as I mentioned, really give your body back something. The typical time that we should be looking to achieve as a grown adult, National Sleep Foundation would say about 7 hours is the sweet spot now to be optimal for peak performance. But this sleep cycle that was discovered and obviously evolved in the late 60s and the 70s, they noticed that there was changes in the amplitude of the actual brain waves that were being captured, the frequency, which were cycles per second, what they look like, the shape of the waves started changing. And so they started, again, digging deeper to find out that each one of these stages of sleep is really affording a symptomatic improvement to allow you to wake up and feel refreshed. So the first stage that we're going to go through here is just stage 1, right? It's this 90-minute cycle. We're going to break down the 3 or 4 stages that we go through. Stage 1 is really just this transitional stage. You're not asleep yet. Could be kind of related to being asleep on the couch. You're kind of lying down after a meal. You're kind of somewhat connected to your environment. You're drifting off in bed. This is usually about a 7 to 10 minute window. If it's taking 15, 20, 30 minutes to fall asleep, they call that a delayed sleep onset latency, which essentially is how long it takes you to fall asleep. And if it's getting to be quite lengthy, it might be worth investigating. But essentially, stage 1 is just the transitional period. It's light sleep. You start your eye movements start to slow down. And out of that 90-minute cycle, this is really only about a 5-minute kind of section of that 90 minutes. We quickly then move into stage 2, which is now sleep onset. We are now in the stage of sleep. It's characterized by what they call sleep spindles. So little bursts of activity. You can see the little EEG templates at the bottom there, and K complexes as well, which are also linked to memory and consolidation and retrieval. So what actually happens in stage 2 is our body's core temperature has to come down a couple of degrees to initiate sleep. And that's what happens in our stage 2. Our body's core temperature has to drop 1 or 2 degrees to be able to allow sleep onset to occur. So the kind of general ruling here is for your bedroom to have that temperature set somewhere between 65 to 68 degrees to allow sleep to actually take place. If the room is too hot, you're going to find a very difficult time to not just initiate sleep, but also to maintain it because of the temperature. So one of the sleep hygiene tips that we'll talk about a little bit later is, again, making sure that your bedroom is kind of conducive to that environment. Our heart rate drops, of course, at this particular stage of sleep, and so does the body temperatures I mentioned. We quickly then move into deep sleep. In this slide, it says NREM, which is essentially non-REM. So there's 2 different sections. There's your REM sleep, which is your rapid eye movement and your dreams. Then there's the other section that's called non-REM. It used to be known as stage 3 and 4. It's also known as slow wave sleep. So this is when your body physically repairs itself. Growth hormone is released, muscle and tissue regeneration take place. So let's say you're recovering from a knee injury, for instance, or you've gone for a long walk, you've run a half marathon. Your body physically repairs itself when it's in slow wave sleep. And most of the slow wave sleep occurs in the first half of the night. You can kind of break it down into that non-REM and REM. And the non-REM is that slow wave that affords the physical restoration, so you can get up and physically battle the day. And then the REM sleep that occurs following is more of the cognitive restoration. That happens a little bit more towards the latter part of the night or the early part of the morning, depending on how you want to look at it. But again, the slow wave sleep is critical. When I talk to the Ottawa Senators, work with the Toronto Argonauts in their development camp as well, just to throw Toronto in there. We talk specifically about the necessity to have the sufficient amount of slow wave sleep to afford that physical restoration. These sports teams have got rigorous workout routines, and obviously their output is a lot more than the average person. Once that slow wave sleep is actually finished in that 90-minute cycle, we slowly then transition into our REM sleep, which is responsible for our cognitive horsepower, how we process information. Memory consolidation takes place. So the things that we learn throughout the daytime, if you're in meetings, if you're learning new initiatives, if you're in conference workshops, not only the amount of sleep you get that night, but specifically the amount of REM sleep that you achieve, that rapid eye movement, will allow you to essentially hit save on those memories and encode them for a quick retrieval, maybe a day later, 2 days later. So if you're not getting quality REM sleep, what can happen is, you keep thinking, geez, we just talked about this a couple of days ago. Why am I not able to retrieve that information? How come I can't remember that? And that's sometimes often linked to a lack of REM sleep. And that can be caused by, a couple of different sleep disorders that can potentially occur, which we'll talk about later. So again, your non-REM sleep, physical restoration, body heals itself. REM sleep, more for that cognitive performance, how sharp we are, learning and mental restoration. There's a lot of erratic breathing as well that happens during our REM sleep. That's because there's a muscle atonia that takes over the body. When we have our REM, the muscle atonia that occurs is to prevent us from acting out in our dreams. And so a lot of shallow breathing can actually start to occur, not to be confused with like respiratory events that are linked to sleep apnea as well. So this 90-minute cycle repeats itself over and over and over again throughout the course of the night. And essentially, these 90-minute sleep cycles are repetitive in nature, and they start to kind of shift a little bit based on how old we are, and also, the amount of time that we spend in each particular sleep stage. So, young teenagers, early 20s would spend significant amounts of time in their slow wave sleep, whereas the older population, the plus 55, plus 60, plus 70, I don't want to say the older population and use 55. I don't want to be booed out of the room. But let's say the seniors specifically, 65 and up, they actually have a lot less slow wave sleep. It's due to what they call a shift in their sleep architecture. So a lot of people will think, is there the common myth that as we get older we need less sleep, and that's simply not true. What ends up happening is our ability to maintain the sleep becomes the issue. So due to the fact that we're getting less slow wave sleep, it's a lot easier to arouse from it. Obviously, as we get older as well, there's different medications that come into play. Maybe we're recovering from an injury that's plaguing us. So, you start to get hip pain or knee pain or shoulder pain over time. So again, as we get older, there is that shift in sleep architecture, which prevents us from getting those larger blocks of slow wave sleep and keeping us in the lighter stages. And hence why you probably see a lot of seniors taking naps in the afternoon. It's not because they need less, it's because their ability to maintain it in a larger block becomes the problem. Sleep hygiene is a term that we use to it's basically best sleep practices. It's a variety of sleep practices and habits that are necessary to have solid nighttime sleep and full daytime alertness, as I read that kind of verbatim off of the National Sleep Foundation. So this doesn't mean necessarily, having a shower before you go to bed. There are a lot of different best sleep practices that you can implement on a nightly basis. So you don't have to go to sleep labs to figure this out. There are best sleep practices that you can put into play. The most paramount one that we'll talk about in a moment is going to bed at the same time and getting up at the same time. But for the slide that we're looking at now, this is kind of like a 3-2-1 method where they're saying, no food 3 hours before bed unless it's a light snack. What you don't want to do is have a massive meal personally, I love having a big bowl of spaghetti or something and flopping on the couch, and I'll pass out instantly. But what you don't want to do is have that meal really late in the evening, 10 o'clock, 10:30, and then climb into bed, because ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to be digesting that throughout the course of the night. It can cause some acid reflux, indigestion, and it is going to wake you up potentially throughout the course of the evening. No drinks 2 hours before bed. Obviously, if you're somebody that wakes up frequently throughout the course of the night, you want to limit the liquid intake just to prevent bathroom breaks. Again, kind of simple sleep hygiene tactics. And then no screen time 1 hour before bed. The screen time has been shown to delay the release of melatonin. So melatonin is our sleep-inducing hormone, and it prevents us from, it actually induces sleep and allows us to fall asleep easier. So if you have a phone in the bed with you, or you have a tablet, or a TV in the bedroom, essentially what's happening there is there's melatonin that's built up in the pineal gland throughout the course of the day. And melatonin builds and builds and builds. It's actually released at 2 different times of the day. One in the early hours of the afternoon around 2 o'clock, hence why we can tend to feel tired, kind of mid-afternoon, especially after we've had lunch. But then it also releases as the nighttime approaches. So exposure to daylight throughout the course of the day allows the pineal gland to build more and more melatonin. And then in turn, it actually releases, allowing us to feel sleepy. And going back to the previous slide, the blue light actually suppresses that. So if you've got those tablets in bed with you, the main takeaway here is get them out of the bedroom. The bedroom really should be just used for, sleep and sex, being intimate, but you don't want to have these devices in the bed with you. They also cause a lot of brain activity to trigger when you're constantly getting alerts, emails. We've become a society now where you're constantly engaged with your world. Like in a capitalist society, businesses want you either to be producing something or consuming something, right? So you're getting pings on your phone. Ultimately, the main takeaway, again, any electronic devices, clear out of the room. We're talking here now about maintaining a regular sleep schedule, which is the first slide or picture in this block. Maintaining a sleep schedule is probably the most paramount sleep hygiene technique you can implement. And again, nothing is needed except your own kind of initiative. If we go to bed at midnight one night and we're up at 6 a.m. and we only got our 6 hours because we're quite tired, so the next night we go to bed at 10 p.m. and we're getting up at maybe 7, and then the next night it's 1 o'clock in the morning because it's a Friday and you're sleeping until 9 a.m. There's no continuity there. Our body craves routine and craves regular scheduled hours. The reason why is those sleep cycles that we just talked about, they start to tailor themselves to very specific hours. And if you are diligent with your bedtime and your rise time, what'll end up happening is, and some people may actually already have this happen, you'll actually wake up a couple minutes before your alarm if you have it set. And that's because those sleep cycles will naturally pull you out of a deeper stage of sleep into a lighter stage of sleep, and then allow you to raise and hit the day feeling refreshed. If you're waking up and there's no continuity, you might be actually ripped out of a deeper stage of sleep, and obviously it would be much harder to get the ball rolling. So if you were to do a Google search on sleep hygiene techniques, maintaining a proper sleep schedule, as I mentioned, would be absolutely paramount in that particular sense. These are just a couple tips that we're throwing up. Again, all kind of riding into that sleep hygiene technique. Again, for some of your drivers that are on the road, 7 hours is kind of that sweet spot. 7 to 8 hours if you can. Oversleeping is obviously not great, and reducing that hour, the sleep, to under 7 hours can really have detrimental effects on everything from performance to reaction time, memory and concentration when people are on the road. So achieving that 7-8 hours is really the biggest takeaway here. Obviously, when transport drivers are moving and they're on the road all the time, taking regular breaks, stretching, obviously having healthy snacks, and getting as much exercise as possibly can. I'm sure there's lots of information that you guys already have access to with, how to keep a healthy person behind the wheel to make sure that they're going to be optimal. Again, when they're long stretches of driving, implementing these tips would be obviously paramount as well. Some of the fatigue signs to look out for would obviously be yawning, losing focus. They've done lots of studies now on fatigue impairment, and the comparison would be to the level of alcohol consumption and the fatigue impairment that comes with that. So if a person has been awake for longer than 16 hours, they actually have the same fatigue impairment level as somebody with a blood alcohol concentration level of 0.05. If they've been awake longer than 20 hours, they actually have the fatigue impairment level of somebody who has the blood alcohol concentration of 0.08. So these extended periods of time of wakefulness, adenosine actually builds up in our system, which is another chemical which makes us feel sleepy. And if we're not releasing that adenosine in our system, it'll cause us to obviously feel extremely tired, and then can obviously impact a lot of different potential risks while on the road. Everything from fender benders to losing concentration, falling asleep behind the wheel would obviously be the worst case scenario here. So looking at these different things that you could potentially implement, best sleep hygiene practices. Again, as I've mentioned before, caffeine is a great tool you can use, but you don't want to take it too late in the day because it can actually implement or delay your sleep onset latency. Caffeine, as I guess, is probably like oxygen to transport drivers, where they fuel themselves with it all the time. But if you're trying to get a solid quality night's sleep, caffeine, again, can stay in your system for 8 hours, and it can delay your sleep onset latency, which is your ability to fall asleep at nighttime. So, a great tool to use in your toolbox. And I'm obviously going to say stop drinking caffeine, but the general rule of thumb, and I'm not trying to be, puritanical here. These are just the guidelines that are given out by the National Sleep Foundation to make sure that people are getting the rest they need at night. So after 2 o'clock is the recommended time to cut out caffeinated products. For a good night's sleep, excuse me, for planning for your bedroom or your cab, or what, that I believe there's a variety of different people that are in the crowd with different, responsibilities and different job titles. Your room, it should be your sleep sanctuary. It should be the area that when you get there, it's there to do one thing, and that's to sleep. We already talked about removing screens, so I won't touch on that again. But, making sure that the environment that you're in is really dark and quiet. That will allow the secretion of melatonin to creep in, as we talked about as well. Having it cool, we mentioned already, somewhere between 65 to 68 degrees. The clock can be it's an external time cue, which is also known as a Zeitberger, and it can actually turn into a negative, especially if you've only got a limited amount of time to sleep. You really want to have the clock on the other side of the room or turned around, and so you're not going to obsess over it. These external time cues, like clocks, like your phone in the bedroom, can cause you to kind of obsess. I'm sure a lot of people that are in the meeting right now, it's like you've looked at your clock and it's like, okay, if I fall asleep right now, I'll have 5 hours exactly. If I fall asleep right now, I'll have 4.5 hours, and it becomes this negative obsession, because all you're really focusing on is how much time you've got left. So, an easy tip would be to be, if you're in the bedroom, to put the alarm clock on the other side of the room, set it and forget it. And so you're not even aware of it. As I said, it could be quite detrimental if you start spiraling down that hole. What we're going to talk about here now next is essentially the naps. So a nap is a great tool to have in your toolbox. Of course, if this was an interactive session where you had access to your microphone, I'd be asking a couple different questions, but obviously that's been muted. No worries there. But a nap is one of those tools that you can use that can have an amazing benefit. What you want to be very careful of, though, is that you keep the nap somewhere between, let's say, 20 to maybe 30 or 40 minutes. You don't want to have yourself get into a deeper stage of sleep. If you're able to go a full 90 minutes worth of sleep, you'd actually go through all of those different sleep stages, allowing you to close out with a REM period, which would allow for kind of a full restoration of all your different abilities. So the recharging of energy stores, it improves alertness and concentration. It allows you to reduce your stress levels. But again, you don't want to get caught in between that maybe 40 minutes and that hour and a half, or let's say, 60-minute window. What ends up happening, that's almost like deemed like purgatory. So if you can get to that 20 or 30-minute section where you're able to fall asleep, you'll wake up feeling refreshed. But if you fall into this 60 or 70-minute area, you go into your slow wave sleep, which is a lot more difficult to arouse from. There's something called sleep inertia that occurs, or a sleep grogginess. I'm sure people that are, listening again, you've gone and you've taken a nap and you wake up and you're like, Jesus, I actually feel worse now than I did when I went to bed. And that's because your body has gotten into a deep stage of slow wave sleep, and you weren't able to complete the sleep cycle, being that REM period, allowing you to transition out easily. So the 20 minutes to 30-minute nap time will allow you to get into the first stage of sleep, which is just that transition piece that we talked about, and ultimately stage 2, which can really afford symptomatic improvement. But what you don't want to do is, again, get into that purgatory up and over 40 minutes and not able to complete it. I don't know many people that can nap for 90 minutes at a time in their regular day. If you can, good on you. Have that 90 minutes and you'll wake up getting the benefits of all of those sleep stages. But typically the main takeaway here would be somewhere between 20 to 30 minutes. Now, melatonin, who, when, and where, endogenous versus exogenous. We've talked about melatonin a little bit already, so I won't spend too much time on this. But as mentioned, melatonin is our sleep-inducing hormone. It builds up in the pineal gland, and it allows us to feel sleepy in the evening with the arrival of darkness. Now, there are exogenous forms, and what essentially that means is your over-the-counter, gummies that you potentially get, little pills that are, usually 0.5 or a full milligram of melatonin. And you have to be careful because melatonin, when you're taking it over the counter, is really just a blunt instrument. It doesn't really help with your sleep quality. It allows you to fall asleep. It's almost like getting to like the starting line of a race. It's not going to help you win the race, but it'll help you maybe out the gate kind of thing. So the levels of what's actually quite alarming. I went on CTV News a few months back to report on this. I go on there as a sleep subject matter expert to talk about different sleep topics. And because melatonin is actually listed as a dietary aid and it's not regulated, the amount of actual melatonin in each gummy was all over the map. Some reports showed that there was only 20% of what was actually claimed to be on the bottle of actual melatonin. And then in other circumstances, the actual dosage was 400 times the amount. And it was actually putting small children in emergency rooms. So while melatonin can be used, you should be really using it as a Band-Aid solution. If you are on the road for extended periods of time, and that's kind of your day-to-day, that is your norm, you have to figure out other ways to be able to fall asleep. Again, it's a blunt instrument. It allows you to fall asleep, but it's not going to help your sleep quality overall. You can render somebody unconscious by hitting them overhead with a bat. There's a big difference between being unconscious and actually getting quality restorative sleep. And essentially that's what the extra melatonin does, is it'll knock you out. But again, you don't want to become dependent on it where you're now having to use more and more, because you will build up a tolerance just like anything else. And then all of a sudden, you're looking to other things or the maximum amounts. And again, you got to be careful because it's not regulated, and the amounts that are in there, it's a bit of a Russian roulette, if you will. Or, you're not really sure what you're going to get, especially if you're using some of the melatonin with your teenagers or your younger ones. So moving on from that, alcohol and sleep. Now, alcohol, it's kind of the same situation where it will actually allow you to fall asleep easily. But what it does is it actually fragments your sleep throughout the course of the night. It also suppresses your REM sleep. So if you're having, a couple of glasses of wine, if you're having a couple of beers, a bourbon, whatever your jam is, what's happening is it increases your sleep onset latency, which is how quickly do you fall asleep. But ultimately, it's going to cause more frequent awakenings later on in the evening. I've got a couple of things. I'm moving a little bit faster just for the sense of time here. But, even just 1 or 2 drinks has been known to decrease our sleep quality by almost 10%. A moderate amount of alcohol, which would be over 2 servings of alcohol, a decrease in our sleep quality by 24%. And if you're having more than 2 drinks, 3, 4, 5 beers, this is going to be a massive impact, and actually 40% of your sleep quality can be impacted. When I used to work at the Queensway Carleton Hospital as a sleep technologist, I would have people that would come in to do a sleep test, and they'd say, I'm used to having 5 or 6 beers before bed. That was commonplace. But what ends up happening is it increases, obviously the bathroom breaks throughout the course of the night because there's just more liquid going through. It actually metabolizes into a sugar as it gets processed. So while it'll allow you to fall asleep quickly, as it metabolizes throughout the course of the evening, so the early hours, let's say 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, it'll actually turn into a stimulant because of the process of being into a sugar now, and it will cause multiple awakenings throughout the back half of the night. And as I mentioned already, it acts as a REM suppressant. So, you may wake up in the morning feeling, hungover essentially. You haven't received that REM sleep that you need to, that affords that cognitive restoration, and it suppresses your REM sleep. So you may not hit it every 90 minutes until maybe, the last hour of sleep. So again, alcohol, well, I'm not saying, don't have any drinks. A good takeaway here would be, if you are going to have a drink, maybe have it over the dinner hour as opposed to the nightcap. The nightcap is been a frame term. Well, I'll have an hour before bed and it knocks me out. Fantastic. Again, it's going to impact you later hours of the evening and impact that sleep. So, having it maybe with dinner, a glass of wine at maybe 6 o'clock. And if you're going to bed at 11, it will have allowed, 4 or 5, maybe 6 hours, depending on your bedtime, to be actually processed and not impact your sleep quality overall. Again, it's just an aid, and not a very good one at that. There's been lots of reports in the news now that are saying even more than one drink a week is actually increasing a variety of different risks, such as cancer and so on and so forth. But again, that's new data. And as we do more research, obviously, the numbers change and so on and so forth. Again, everything I'm saying here, I'm not saying cut out your coffee. I'm not saying cut out your alcohol. I'm simply giving you what the data suggests and the best kind of sleep practices. Now, insomnia, we're going to get into, a couple little sleep disorders here. Insomnia can be, a couple of different forms. And the main two forms are transient. It was actually termed COVID-somnia as well when we were in the middle of the pandemic, versus chronic. So insomnia isn't the inability to just fall asleep. It's the inability to fall asleep and also the inability to maintain it. A lot of people are able to fall asleep after about an hour or two, or, they sleep for 3 hours. All of a sudden they wake up and now they can't go back to sleep at all, unless it's maybe the last half an hour before their alarm clock goes up. So, again, to be defined, the inability to fall asleep and maintain sleep as well. Transient insomnia is usually just a short bout. It is maybe for a couple of weeks. It could be due to an external stressor, such as, you've lost your job, there's been a death in the family, maybe there are financial obligations that you're not able to meet. And this is usually just something that stays with you for a couple of weeks, and then it passes. You may have these bouts, more than once per year. Maybe it happens a couple of times a year based on your lifestyle and, what you're dealing with. But it is truly different between chronic insomnia. And chronic insomnia, if you are deemed to be a chronic insomniac, this is something that you likely would have been dealing with since you were very young, maybe at the onset of being a teenager, or your late teens, early 20s. And this is people that can't fall asleep, maybe for 3 months, for bouts of 3 months or longer at a time, unable to fall asleep to maintain sleep. And they're likely getting, maybe only 2 hours or 3 hours on a nightly basis at absolute most. So everybody goes through those transient bouts. Again, life is tough. It throws curveballs at us all the time. So, you have to kind of mitigate, and putting those best sleep practices in would be the best way to try to get through them. But the chronic insomnia, if you identify with anything I've just said with the chronic insomniacs, definitely you probably have already reached out to your family physician and maybe a sleep specialist, a cognitive behavioral specialist, etc. So the ways to these are some of the common causes, more from a medical perspective, and these would be from the chronic condition, dementia, Parkinson's disease, medications, of course. If we're taking certain medications, it can interfere, and some of the other things that we've already talked about, like caffeine, nicotine, and alcohol. If you're somebody who has trouble falling asleep at night, watching your alcohol intake, watching your caffeine intake. And I didn't mention this at the beforehand when we were talking about naps. While it is an amazing tool to have in your toolbox, if you are somebody that can't fall asleep at night, or you have difficulty sleeping at night, naps should be obliterated completely. They are extremely beneficial, and can afford all those symptoms or symptomatic improvement that we've already talked about. But if you have a hard time falling asleep, wipe them out completely. There is no substitute for a full night quality 7 hours. You can't get 4 hours in the evening and then have a 2 or 3 hour nap and break it down like that. It's just not going to work. So again, circling back around to the nap slide that we've already gone past, if you have problems falling asleep, get rid of the nap in the daytime. Some of the treatments of insomnia, as we talked about, could be just, your simple sleep hygiene measures, exercising as much as you possibly can throughout the daytime. When we exercise, it allows us to go into deeper stages of sleep. We also fall asleep faster. That's part of the sleep hygiene measures. There is light therapy that you can access as well that emits strong UVs that allow you to, have that buildup of adenosine throughout the course of the day, which will allow you to fall asleep and a melatonin to creep in. And also there's pharmacology treatments as well. We've talked a little bit about melatonin already. So again, those ones are more of those blunt instruments. We're going to move into sleep apnea now. And sleep apnea is, it's defined as a cessation of breathing for 10 seconds or longer. The prevalence is massive. We have to get away from this preconceived notion that apnea only affects heavy-set people. It's a complete cessation of 10 seconds or longer. I've had patients that stop breathing, just a few times per hour. I've had patients that stop breathing over 100 times per hour. And, rewind to the early 2000s, we thought that, oh, well, it's only heavy-set people that have apnea. It's a heavy person problem. It's not. I've had patients that are 400 pounds and had no problems breathing. And I've had patients that have been $150 and they've been some of the worst I've ever seen. The prevalence is obviously much more in males than females, but there are lots of females as well that also suffer from sleep apnea. We offer home-based sleep testing, and I was reviewing some analysis this week, and I had two ladies back to back that were, one was, I believe, 48 and the other one was 53 years of age. They were both between about 145 and 160 pounds, and both of them were deemed to be severe apneics. Now, what that means is they stop breathing over 30 times an hour. Sleep apnea is broken down into mild, moderate, and severe, and it's based on what they call an AHI, or an apnea-hypopnea index. Apnea, again, to be a complete cessation of breathing for 10 seconds or longer, as I mentioned. The H in AHI means hypopnea, so it's a reduction in airflow. Your upper airway is open, it's just not as open as it potentially could be. And of course, I is the index, so upper air resistance. So anything between 5 to 15 events per hour is deemed mild. Anything between 15 to 30 events per hour is deemed moderate. And anything over 30 events per hour is deemed severe. But again, to give you an idea of how severe can be, I've had patients that stop breathing over 100 times an hour. They literally fall asleep, their upper airway closes. They have a massive pause. They take a couple recovery breaths. And what ends up happening is their oxygen levels start plummeting. They go into the toilet, excuse the crude expression, but ultimately that's what happens. You have a long pause, your oxygen levels drop, and your brain sends a signal to start breathing again. And if it's happening repeatedly throughout the course of the night, many different systems are being affected. One of the most dangerous ones is with the oxygen levels dropping, it's increasing the risk of heart attack, stroke, and congestive heart failure. Nobody really dies from sleep apnea, but what it does is it exacerbates an underlying cardiac condition. You have these pauses, the strain on your heart from your oxygen levels dropping almost acts as like, it's like your heart's running a marathon in the evening when it should be resting and recovering. So as we get into our late 40s, our 50s, our 60s, and the older we get, that increased risk of heart attack and stroke goes up tenfold. It can be very dangerous. The CBC News just came out with an article in February talking about how 1 in 4 people now have sleep apnea or are at risk. And 80% of the population is still not diagnosed. And that's probably due to a lack of sleep testing. So there are some treatments available. And the first and the most common one that maybe some people are aware of are obstructive sleep apnea, which is CPAP therapy. Hi, Mike. How much time have we got?
Yeah, just to let you know, you got about 5 minutes left to leave time for questions. But if you go a bit longer, that's fine too. No questions have popped in yet.
I appreciate the heads up. Thank you. So again, the most common treatment for obstructive sleep apnea is CPAP, which stands for continuous positive airway pressure. What it is it's a mask that many of you know, or maybe some of you are using, a mask that goes over your nose and or your mouth, and it acts as a pneumatic splint for your upper airway. It removes all of those respiratory events. It keeps your oxygen levels up where they're supposed to be. And ultimately, it doesn't cure sleep apnea, it treats it. So, if you're somebody that may be potentially at risk, obviously the investigation piece is key here. There are other alternatives to CPAP. There are oral appliances that draw your bottom jaw forward. They're called mandibular advancements, and of course, weight reduction. We actually at Sleep Efficiency now are building a sleep efficiency management system that'll take just a minute or two to go over it. But I would also like to invite whoever's in the webinar to reach out to me directly. This is a program that we're actually building now specifically for transportation, the transportation industry. And the management system is picture a vault where we have a relationship with the employees and we have a relationship with the employers. And essentially what it's going to allow us to do, we've had some people already that have shown some interest. The biggest elephant in the room is obviously many of your drivers may be at risk for having sleep apnea, but they don't want to get tested. Obviously, the employer does not want to lose half of their drivers if there's a whole bunch of positive testing, and the employees are actually nervous because they don't want to have their license taken. What our sleep efficiency management system does and what our Vault program will initially offer is to protect the identity of the actual driver themselves, where we will test the ones that are interested in doing so. We will also implement therapy to make sure that they are actually being treated, but the employer won't actually know. The results will be completely private and confidential. Now, for the employer, this will allow them to have access to all of the de-identified reports. It will allow you to submit reports to your insurance providers that will ultimately allow a reduced cost for the different insurance that you have to get. I suspect it is the most expensive payout, or that you have to make on an annual basis. But again, what I'm looking for here, and if there's anybody in there, I would really appreciate somebody who's interested in addressing the elephant in the room, which is, again, so many of your drivers are potentially at risk. So again, main takeaway, it protects the driver from knowing from the employer knowing who the actual employee is, but sleep efficiency will guarantee the testing and the compliance rates and reporting back to your insurance companies, allowing you to have that reduction. And we will actually manage that system for you guys. Again, I know I'm up against a clock here. I'd like to talk about it a little bit more. The slide deck will be distributed, so Mike can send that over. So ultimately, I won't go through the pop quiz here, as again, we know we're up against it. I do want to leave time for questions. Sleep efficiency, what we do is we offer home-based sleep tests. These can all be done in the comfort of your own home. They can be done in the cab of the truck, on the road, minimal disruption. All of our results are reviewed by respirologists. All of the referring physicians get copies of the results. In the SEMS program, the employer will get a copy as well, but again, de-identified. Right now, the alternative is to go to a hospital where you're waiting up to a year to get a sleep test done. You're sleeping in a bed that's been slept in 1,000 times before. We offer that alternative where we can test in the comfort, again, on the road, in the comfort of your own bed when they're back for a weekend. And we can get those results within 48 hours of the test being completed. We ship devices right across the country. So no matter where you are, we can get a device delivered to your front door within 24 to 48 hours. We actually had a few devices just ship out to Nunavut and Iqaluit. We had the results done in 5 days. So, if it's a personal thing for you, if it's, you think that it's time to actually acknowledge that white elephant that I keep referring to, and maybe take the next step to see how we can, improve the safety of your drivers, I would love to talk offline with some of you and be able to offer that as a solution. Again, protecting the driver and also, improving the road safety with the different transport drivers that are out there. So I'll close it out there. Again, I had a few more things to discuss, but again, for the interest of time, Mike, if we want to open the floor up. I don't think you said there were any questions in the chat. Maybe somebody wants to throw something in now. And again, please reach out to Mike directly to get my contact information. Sleepefficiency.ca is our website. You can email me directly through the site. Patients can also self-refer. We do not need a family doctor to proceed with a sleep test. So we find that family physicians are often a bottleneck. If somebody wants to just investigate this on their own, again, we do not need a physician's order to do so. People can request a test directly through our site. And again, we'd be happy to help them out in that capacity. So yeah, I hope you guys found some good takeaways. Hopefully nobody fell asleep. And if they did, maybe that's, maybe that's a compliment rather than an insult. But I'll leave it at that. And again, thank you for the opportunity, guys. I really appreciate you taking time out of your day to connect with me here.
Okay, perfect. Thanks, Andrew. So just so everybody knows, since we have a smaller crowd here, I have changed the security settings. If you want to come on camera and ask your question in person, feel free to do so. I have the ability to do that. If you're not comfortable doing that, you can still do the chat as well. A couple of questions have come up.
Yeah, I see those.
One from Terry. How do you
I
get
can-
the accurate readings without all the leads being connected like they are at the sleep clinics?
That's a great question. So the hospital is still the gold standard, where they're looking for 100 different types of sleep disorders. Hence why they have all the electrodes attached to the head. And as mentioned, I used to run a sleep lab for a decade. So those particular hospital tests, they're looking for a variety of different things. They could be looking for seizure activity. They could be looking for REM behavior disorder, which are parasomnias. What our tests are designed to do are to rule out or rule in sleep disorder breathing. So we're measuring respiratory effort, we're measuring airflow, we're measuring oximetry and heart rate, body position, and sleep stages as well. But we actually don't need to attach electrodes to the head specifically in order to do that. Again, what we're looking for here is to rule in or rule out sleep apnea. So if the indications are, multiple awakenings, waking gasping, morning headaches, poor memory and concentration, those would be the symptoms for apnea. If you're somebody that has restless leg syndrome, or maybe there's been witnessed seizure activity, then the hospital approach would be better for you. Again, we rule out or rule in any sort of respiratory related issues that fall under that sleep disorder breathing umbrella, which is sleep apnea.
Okay.
Is
Another
napping
one
healthy then?
Yes, go ahead. Yep.
So yeah, the napping, as I mentioned, it is exceptionally healthy. It can help improve memory and concentration. It can reduce stress levels, help with anxiety. The one caveat there, though, that I mentioned was if you have problems sleeping at nighttime, do not nap throughout the daytime. If you fall asleep, no problem, and you've got the quality 7 hours that you can acquire on a nightly basis, then go for it. Again, the main takeaway was to have it between 20 to 30 minutes, so you don't get into really deep stages, so you can actually retrieve that's those symptomatic improvements. You don't want it to go into 60 or 70, where you get into those deep stages of sleep causing sleep inertia, which is that grogginess. So again, fantastic to use. Naps can be extremely beneficial. They actually have napping pods now in different businesses because they see the actual benefit to having it. But again, Carolina, I guess it is, or Carolina, if you have problems falling asleep at night, take it out completely. There's no substitute for getting a solid 7 hours in the evening.
Do you want to read the next one there, Manny? Do you see that?
Sure. This is from Manny. I have
Yep.
about 20 guys that are on overnights. What's the pricing to give them the home tests?
Do you want it? Yeah, go ahead. Sorry. No, I was going to ask if that was a conversation you wanted to have one-on-one, or if you can answer.
I can answer brief, Manny, but you can reach out to me directly. The fee for our tests are $349. What that gets you, of course, is the device delivered directly to the front door. It includes the respirologist fee, so we have a sleep physician on staff that reviews all of the results. It includes a PDF copy to the patient directly, and it also includes a post-test analysis to discuss the results. So when the report is completed, we actually walk through the report together with the actual patient, allowing them to fire off questions pertaining to the results and where they're feeling the answers to ensure they feel they've got good value, but more importantly, they've understood everything. So yeah, if you've got a group of 20, there'd obviously be a price break. We would be able to, if we were going to do a group setting, we could do 10 at a time if you wanted to. But yeah, maybe that, again, for future offline conversations, Manny, reach out to me directly. I will put my phone number in the chat here. This is my personal mobile, and you guys can reach me directly here as well. 613-528-324. There's somebody else here. Can you just test breathing or sleep quality, brain work, etc.? The devices that we have now are able to determine different sleep stages. You are able to determine how much time we spend in our REM sleep. We are able to determine how much time you're spending in your slow wave sleep. We are able to calculate the number of awakenings through the course of the night, how long it took you to fall asleep. There's a tremendous amount of robust data that comes out of the devices. We are not looking for EEG specifically. So, if there are, as I mentioned already, if the indication might be seizure activity, that would be a different type of test that would be recorded. But yeah, lots of great robust data that comes out. Again, our respirologist would not be attaching his name to any report if he didn't feel that it was clinically validated, which ours are by the American Academy of Sleep Medicine.
There is one further up there that you missed from Terry. Can your home test determine if you need a CPAP or APAP?
Absolutely. And that's exactly the first step. The first step in the process is the diagnostic. Do you have apnea? Is it mild, moderate, or severe? Does it need to be treated? And if so, what is the best pathway forward? We have a wonderful relationship So we don't offer the CPAP therapy. You shouldn't be involved in the diagnosis if you're selling the solution, but we have our partner who we've had a great relationship with for some time now. The company is called Medigas. They're right across Canada. They're like the Nike of CPAPs, the best one you could possibly go with. So if it's found that we do have a positive result, we will then bridge you into a warm handoff with Medigas that will be able to provide you with the CPAP machines afterwards. So baked into the actual diagnosis from a respirologist would be the parameters needed to move forward with the purchase of a CPAP machine and APAP as you've listed. So auto CPAP. CPAP is continuous positive airway pressure. APAP is auto with a baseline, a minimum pressure and a maximum. So the answer is yes. And that's exactly what we do. You've hit the nail on the head there, Terry. What we're looking to do is to diagnose you to see if CPAP is needed. And then we have the solution with Medigas to be able to move you forward to make sure that the therapy is on track.
Okay, now we get 2 minutes left. I don't see another question in here, but I have one.
Go for it.
What do you recommend to a driver, especially a long haul driver? Because you indicated, obviously, you know, if it's better if you go to bed at the same time, get up at the same time. And in an ideal world, that'd be lovely. But even those of us that aren't long haul drivers, you have to take kids to sporting events. You have other things to go to. Like you can't always do that. And truck drivers who are long haul, a lot of times they may drive 10, 11 hours. They sleep 8, they drive 10, 11, they're off for 5 or 6. The law says they have to have 8 a day, but it's not always at the same time. So the time you go to bed might be different every day for 6 or 7 days in a row. And there really isn't anything you can do about it because that's what the hours of service regulations are kind of pushing you into doing if you're driving long haul. So if you can't have a regular sleep schedule, do you recommend anything that can help somebody out?
Yeah, those best sleep hygiene practices are, you know, there's probably 10 or 15 of them on my actual website as well. We have a sleep tips page where we offer something, it's specifically for the shift worker, which is kind of like what you're talking about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's the shift worker. It's when I did overnights for 10 years, I used to say I got used to not getting used to it. It played havoc with our system. But ultimately the sleep hygiene practices are the best things that you could possibly do to implement, you know, getting the hours. You have to work with what you've got. Sometimes there's no way around it and it's just part of your life. But the sleep hygiene practices from, you know, getting as many hours as you possibly can, exposing yourself to daylight. So at least the hours that you're able to shut down, you're able to do so. And again, there's probably about 10 or 15 different tips on our website through sleepefficiency.ca that will speak to the shift worker disorder, essentially everything from shifting your sleep schedule to exposure to daylight and so on and so forth, and using aids as well. So again, we could talk more about that, but for the interest of time, I think it'd probably better if they navigated to sleepefficiency.ca, and we have one specifically on shift worker disorder, which speaks to it a little bit more in depth.
Okay, perfect. And one last one did pop up. So if you have a quick second, you want to address that one?
Yeah, I've lost my ability to see the chat.
Okay, well, I'll just read it to you then. Do you test private patients, kids who suffer from autism and ADHD and are always tired and have very, very poor sleep?
So no, we do test for patients over the age of 13. But again, primarily what we're looking to do is to diagnose any breathing, any respiratory related issues. So our threshold, we follow what they call the CPSO guidelines, which is the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario. And home sleep testing is not recommended on those under the age of 13. So 13 is our cutoff. And again, specifically, we're not looking to diagnose or sleep tests. It can give a snapshot, of course. You can get some great information on, the sleep quality, sleep efficiency, which is the name of our business, is actually a medical term as well. Total time in bed divided by the total time sleeping. So there's a lot of great, robust data that comes out of the test, but not specifically geared towards those two indications or those two kind of disorders. We can't process any patients that are under the age of 13 for various reasons. It would be silly to think that the same hardware that you're wearing at night could fit a 300-pound male and fit on a 6-year-old child. And the sleep architecture changes as well from a clinical perspective. So unfortunately, I know as much as I'd like to, 13 and above is the takeaway.
All right, perfect. Well, with that, we're out of time for today. Actually, worked out just about perfect, and we were able to answer all the questions. So, thanks, Andrew, for taking the time to put this presentation on. Thank you to those in the audience who took time out of your day to watch Andrew's presentation, and we will send out a recording. So with that,
and one last thing I just want to say, Mike, a lot of people may not want to out themselves in the meeting and ask a question.
Yeah.
If it's private, if it's personal, my phone number is already in the chat. Reach out via email. I'm happy to have quick consultations. If people would rather just contact me directly, I'm here as a support. Okay, I'm patient care first always.
And we'll send a PDF of the presentation, which also has your contact info in there as well.
Beautiful.
All right, perfect. Thanks again, everybody. Have a great
Thank you.
have a great long weekend. Take care.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.